Magnify God and not your problems. Powerful Psalm 145. God is greedy. You were never meant to be consumed by the weight of your problems. The moment you make your problem bigger than your God, you step out of divine order and into fear. But when you choose to magnify God, when you lift your eyes from the storm and fix your gaze on the one who commands the winds, you enter the realm of miracles. Psalm 145 declares, "Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised." This is not a poetic exaggeration. It is a spiritual law. Whatever you praise expands. Whatever you dwell upon grows. You do not need to beg for breakthrough. You need to shift your attention. The battle is not won by wrestling with the shadows, but by turning on the light. Today we turn from worry to worship, from fear to faith, from anxiety to adoration. For God is not only great, God is here, and that changes everything. What you focus on expands. Magnify God, not the problem. Your life always reflects the object of your dominant attention. There is no escaping this truth. You cannot think one way and live another. The world around you, the circumstances you face, the very shape of your days are born from within. Out of the thoughts you nurture, the feelings you persist in, the vision you hold. When the soul becomes fixed on its troubles, its burdens, and its defeats, the external reality cannot help but mirror that internal posture. You will see more of what you dwell upon. But herein lies the divine secret. If the problem multiplies when magnified, so does the presence of God when exalted in your consciousness. This is why you must deliberately and consistently magnify God, not because he needs your praise, but because you need the transformation that praise activates within you. To magnify is to enlarge, to intensify, to elevate. It is not that God himself becomes bigger when you praise him. It is that your perception of him expands, and in that expansion your fear collapses, your limitations dissolve, and the problem you once feared loses all its power over you. The psalmist did not say, "Great are my troubles," though surely he had many. He did not say, "Worthy to be praised is my fear," though he likely felt its grip. Instead, he declared with unwavering boldness, "Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised." This declaration is more than a song. It is a spiritual strategy. It is a blueprint for freedom. In the presence of praise, confusion scatters. When you speak of God's greatness, not from empty repetition, but from living awareness, you awaken the creative power of your true nature. You align your spirit with the source of all life. The moment you decide to stop analyzing the size of your enemy and instead proclaim the greatness of your God, you are no longer a victim. You are a vessel of divine expression. You shift from begging for breakthrough to becoming the breakthrough, and this is not positive thinking. It is spiritual law in motion. For what you magnify, you multiply. What you behold, you become. There is a war for your attention, and it is fought silently in the inner chambers of your mind. Every time you rehearse the problem, you reinforce its roots. Every time you speak of what isn't working, of what has failed, of what still hurts, you empower that reality to persist. But every time you exalt God above the trial, when you declare that his mercy endures, that his greatness is unsearchable, that his presence is near even when the storm rages, you are not denying the facts, you are transcending them. This is not escapism, this is dominion, this is the inheritance of the awakened soul, the one who no longer lives by sight, but by spiritual insight. To magnify God is to elevate your consciousness to the level where truth reigns and illusion is exposed. The problem does not vanish because you ignore it. It loses power because you displace it with divine awareness. Many live trapped in the cycle of reaction. They see a problem and they react. They feel fear and they feed it. They hear bad news and they speak it again. But to magnify God is to break that cycle. It is to respond, not react. It is to choose moment by moment, to turn your eyes from the valley and fix them on the mountain. You may feel weak, but you declare, "The Lord is my strength." You may feel confused, but you affirm, "God's wisdom lights my path." This is not denial, it is discipline, the discipline of exalting the answer rather than the issue. The practice of abiding in the presence of peace rather than rehearsing chaos. This is what it means to live in praise, not merely singing songs, but becoming the embodiment of truth in a world addicted to problems. You do not need to understand how the situation will change. You only need to remain faithful in magnifying the one who holds all power, Faith is not concerned with mechanics, it is concerned with alignment. As you magnify God, you bring your soul into alignment with His character, His promises, His nature, and in that alignment miracles unfold, doors open, the crooked path becomes straight. Not because you fixed the problem, but because you entered the consciousness in which the problem no longer exists. Psalm 145 is not merely a list of praises, it is a portal. It invites you into a state of divine remembrance, where you no longer see God through the filter of fear, but fear through the lens of God. The verse says, "One generation shall praise your works to another, and shall declare your mighty acts." What does this mean? It means praise becomes your testimony. It means your decision to magnify God in private becomes a public demonstration of His power. The moment you praise Him in the dark, you prophesy the dawn, and creation responds. You are never without a choice. The problem may be real, the pain may be deep, the loss may be profound, but your focus is still your responsibility. You can dwell on what's missing or give thanks for what remains. You can stare at the closed door or lift your hands in praise for the doors yet to open. The choice is not always easy, but it is always yours, and when you choose to magnify God, something within you shifts. You no longer feel small, you no longer feel helpless. You remember who you are and whose you are. Praise reminds you of your origin, your true identity as one born of divine substance, sustained by eternal presence. And in that remembrance your problems begin to shrink, not because they are gone, but because you have outgrown them. So today, decide where your attention will go. Will you magnify the problem and empower its grip? Or will you magnify your God and step into a new reality where nothing is impossible, where grace abounds, where peace governs, where provision flows, and where fear cannot follow? The psalmist wrote, "They shall speak of the glory of your kingdom and talk of your power." Let this be your posture. Let this be your practice. Let praise be your default setting, not just when things are good, but especially when they are not. Because when you magnify God, not as a concept, but as your source, you do more than shift your mindset. You shift the very world around you, and that is the beginning of transformation. Psalm 145 as a mirror of inner praise. Psalm 145 is not merely ancient poetry, it is divine technology for spiritual transformation. It is not meant to be admired at a distance, but entered into, embodied, and expressed as the living language of your soul. Every line of this psalm is a mirror, reflecting the truth of who God is, and more importantly, who you are when you choose to abide in the awareness of that truth. When the psalmist declares, "I will extol you, my God, O King, and I will bless your name forever and ever," he is not simply making a religious statement, he is revealing a spiritual principle, that praise is not a reaction to blessings, but a recognition of the eternal nature of God, the I am within. You do not wait for things to improve to give praise. Praise is the instrument that shifts your world. And Psalm 145 becomes the template for such a shift. Not through mechanical repetition, but through meditative absorption. You are not simply reading words about God, you are awakening the Word within you. Each verse is an invitation to magnify the greatness of the divine, not as something outside of you, but as the essence of your being. Praise is not something you do to impress God, it is the practice of lifting your consciousness to match the vibration of divine truth. Psalm 145 lifts you out of complaint and into communion. It interrupts the soul's tendency to dwell in discouragement and anchors you in the unseen reality of spiritual order. When you say, "Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and His greatness is unsearchable," you are not just speaking of a theological concept, you are activating the higher faculties of faith, awareness, and spiritual perception. You are rising into the consciousness where your problems no longer dominate, because the presence of God has become your dominant awareness. That line, "His greatness is unsearchable," is not an admission of ignorance. It is a celebration of the infinite nature of divine possibility. You cannot search out the limits of God because there are none. And if there are no limits in Him, there are no limits in you when you align with Him. This is not just about praising a faraway deity. It is about recognizing that the infinite lives in you, and your praise awakens the remembrance of that truth. The world teaches you to seek solutions from the outside, to chase answers, to run after strategies, to fix everything externally before you feel at peace internally. But Psalm 145 reveals a different path. Praise becomes the access point to divine wisdom, divine strength, and divine intervention. They shall speak of the glory of your kingdom and talk of your power. It says, this is not idle conversation, it is creative declaration. When you speak of the glory of God's kingdom, you awaken it in your own life. When you talk of his power, you are not just acknowledging strength, you are summoning that power into the details of your existence. It is not enough to think about praise, you must enter into it with your whole being. It must rise from the depths of your soul, from the place where fear once sat, from the place where despair tried to take root. That very ground becomes the altar of praise, and Psalm 145 gives you the vocabulary of transformation. To live in the reality of Psalm 145 is to live above the level of sense and circumstance. It is to remember that God's greatness is not measured by what you see, but by what you know in spirit. The Lord is gracious and full of compassion, slow to anger and great in mercy. These are not just comforting words, they are blueprints for consciousness. When you believe that God is gracious, you begin to expect grace. When you meditate on his compassion, you release the need to carry burdens alone. When you affirm that he is slow to anger and rich in mercy, you dismantle the lie of divine punishment and embrace the truth of divine partnership. God is not a tyrant to be appeased. He is the source that longs to express himself through you. But he cannot flow through a heart filled with complaint, fear, or resentment. Praise clears the path. Praise opens the gate. Praise invites the eternal to manifest in the temporal. Notice the rhythm of the psalm. It does not begin with needs, requests, or desperation. It begins with exaltation. Every day I will bless you, and I will praise your name forever and ever. This is the posture of those who live in the awareness of truth. They do not wait for their day to go right. They declare the greatness of God at the start. They do not wait for things to improve. They lift their vibration through praise until the outer matches the inner. This is the mystery that religious tradition has often missed. That praise is not just emotional expression, it is a spiritual act of creation. You are shaping your world as you speak. You are aligning your path as you declare. You are choosing your atmosphere with every word, and when your words echo the eternal truths of Psalm 145, your atmosphere begins to shift, the fog clears, the heaviness lifts, the power that created the heavens begins to create in you and through you. The Lord upholds all who fall and raises up all who are bowed down. This is not just a promise, it is a reality waiting to be claimed. When you feel like you've failed, when your knees have buckled under the weight of the world, praise lifts you. Not because it changes your circumstances instantly, but because it changes you. It awakens your remembrance. It brings your awareness back to the truth that you were never alone, never abandoned, never forsaken. You may have fallen, but the Lord upholds. You may have been bowed down, but the Lord lifts. This is the power of praise. It repositions your heart in the presence of the Almighty. It pulls your attention from the wound to the one who heals. It breaks the chain of self-pity and opens the channel of divine flow. You cannot stay small when you praise the infinite. You cannot remain stuck when you fix your eyes on the eternal. Psalm 145 is a living invitation to praise, not as a ritual, but as a lifestyle. To walk in it is to live in continual awareness that God is greater than what you face, greater than what you fear, greater than what you've lost. It is to say with conviction, my mouth shall speak the praise of the Lord, and all flesh shall bless his holy name forever and ever. It is not just about blessing him with words, it is about becoming a blessing through your very presence. When you live in praise, your life becomes a testimony. When you speak of his greatness, your words carry power. And when you walk in this awareness daily, not just in moments of worship, but in the ordinary, mundane rhythms of life, you become a living expression of Psalm 145, an echo of eternal truth, a vessel of divine light, a mirror of the glory you behold. Your inner state is the seed of your world. There is one truth that reshapes everything. Your outer world is only the echo of your inner state. You are not pushed around by circumstances. You are living within the fruits of your inner assumptions. The world does not respond to your hopes, wishes, or even your prayers alone. It responds to the state you occupy. It responds to who you believe yourself to be. This is the foundation of spiritual transformation, that nothing truly changes outside until something changes inside. And until you grasp this, you will continue magnifying problems, believing they are the cause of your suffering, instead of realizing they are only the reflection. Your job, then, is not to fight with the reflection. It is to change the image held within when you shift your state, when you rise from fear to faith, from confusion to clarity, from lack to divine supply. The entire rhythm of your life begins to harmonize with your new awareness. That is what it means to magnify God. It is not about increasing who God is, but increasing your awareness of who He is within you, and allowing that awareness to be the new state from which you live, think, and speak. The world will always offer you evidence of lack, fear, brokenness, and limitation, but you must decide whether to accept that evidence as truth or to recognize it as the residue of an old state you are no longer willing to occupy. You must remember that problems are not permanent. They are projections of a former consciousness. If your life is a field, your inner state is the seed, and the fruit will always match the nature of the seed. You cannot plant anxiety and expect peace. You cannot dwell in unworthiness and expect favor. You cannot nurture resentment and expect joy. But when you choose deliberately, faithfully, and persistently to plant the seed of divine awareness, to abide in the knowing that God is great, present, sufficient, and near, then your entire atmosphere begins to reflect that decision. Psalm 145 becomes not just a prayer you recite, but a consciousness you live. The Lord is righteous in all His ways, gracious in all His works. When that becomes your inner knowing, grace and righteousness begin to frame your days. Your inner state is not something you drift into. It is something you must choose. Every moment you are deciding what to magnify. Will you dwell on the storm or the one who calms it? Will you rehearse your weakness or declare His strength? You cannot do both. You must pick your dwelling place, because your life will take the shape of wherever you decide to abide. This is why praise is not merely an emotional high, but a conscious relocation. You leave the land of worry and settle into the realm of peace. You move out of the house of fear and enter the sanctuary of faith, not because your situation changed first, but because you changed first. And then, as surely as light dissolves darkness, your outer world adjusts to reflect the light you now carry within. This is why the psalmist says, "You open your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing." The hand of God is always open, but your ability to receive depends on the state you occupy. Gratitude, worship, praise, these are not just spiritual practices, they are doors. And when you walk through them, you step into the state where divine satisfaction becomes your reality. Many cry out for change but refuse to change states. They keep praying from the same place of fear. They keep affirming lack while asking for abundance, but the law is clear. You must become the thing you seek. Not in theory, but in practice. You must walk, speak, think, and feel from the new place, even when your senses still report the old. This is the work. This is the praise, to live in thanksgiving while nothing seems to be working, to proclaim the greatness of God while standing in the ruins, to declare abundance when the account is empty, not because you are faking it, but because you have chosen to magnify God, not the circumstance. This inner commitment creates spiritual momentum, and eventually the world around you bows to the new authority of your inner life. The Lord is near to all who call upon Him, to all who call upon Him in truth. And what is truth? It is not the facts you see, it is the faith you hold. It is the knowing that God is near now, regardless of appearances. If you wait for the world to change so you can feel peace, you will wait forever. But if you change your inner state, if you rise each day and declare, "Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised," even before the evidence shows up, then your world begins to bend toward your new faith. This is not manipulation, it is spiritual alignment. It is choosing to live from the inside out, not the outside in. The storm does not define you, the report does not define you, the memory, the mistake, the disappointment, they do not define you. What defines you is the state you now choose to inhabit. And when that state is grounded in the awareness of God's greatness, His nearness, His sufficiency, then even in the valley, you will walk as one who knows the mountaintop is within. Because the true mountaintop is not out there, it is in here, it is the elevation of your consciousness, and once your spirit ascends, everything else must follow. You are not waiting on the world is waiting on your awareness to rise. When you see yourself as a victim of circumstance, you lose the power to change. But when you see yourself as one who carries divine life, the very image of the Creator, then you understand nothing changes until you change. And you can change right now, not by striving, but by shifting. Shift from fear to faith, shift from complaint to praise, shift from lack to thanksgiving, shift from doubt to vision. You are not weak. You are not stuck, you are not abandoned, you are the dwelling place of God, and praise is how you awaken that truth. Psalm 145 is not a relic from ancient times, it is a mirror, and when you look into it, you see who God is and who you are in Him. Let the word shape you, let the rhythm guide you, let the spirit of the psalm become your own, and from that place you will no longer magnify your problems. You will magnify the greatness of the one who already dwells within you. Praise is the weapon that reshapes reality. You were never meant to live at the mercy of your environment, nor were you created to be a prisoner to your problems. You were formed in the image of divine imagination, placed within time to reveal the eternal, and entrusted with the power to shape your world, not by force, but by the focused awareness of divine truth. And the greatest weapon in that spiritual arsenal is praise, not the kind of praise that is shallow or routine, but the kind that rises from a deep revelation that God is greater than anything that stands against you. That kind of praise is not passive, it is active, it is power, it is the deliberate lifting of your mind above the noise, the worry, the fear, the illusion. It is the bold declaration that, regardless of what appears to be, you will magnify the unseen reality of God's greatness. And when you praise like that, you do not just feel better. You begin to reshape the very fabric of your reality, because reality is not fixed, it bends to consciousness, and consciousness, lifted in praise, is the creative force that turns darkness to light and limitation to liberty. Praise breaks chains not by attacking them, but by rendering them irrelevant. When you raise your consciousness into alignment with truth, the chains simply fall away, not because they are fought, but because they are forgotten in the radiance of your new awareness. Praise is not flattery, it is alignment, it is not noise, it is navigation. When you lift your voice in praise, you are steering the ship of your life out of stormy waters and into calm seas, not because the storm ceases to exist, but because you have shifted your position. You no longer see from the level of the storm, you see from the level of the one who walks on the waves. That is the secret. Praise elevates perspective, and perspective is everything. A problem at one level is powerless at another. When you remain at the level of the problem, it appears mighty and oppressive, but when you ascend in praise, the problem becomes small, the fear becomes quiet, and the vision becomes clear. You begin to speak differently. You begin to think with power. You stop begging and start declaring, because praise doesn't beg, it affirms. Praise doesn't complain, it prophesies. It sees beyond the surface and agrees with the truth of divine presence and power. That is why the psalmist could write with such boldness, "The Lord is near to all who call upon him, to all who call upon him in truth." The truth is not what your eyes see. The truth is what God is. And when you call upon that truth, not with doubt but with reverent praise, the atmosphere changes, the room shifts, the invisible begins to organize itself in your favor. You cannot be full of praise and full of panic at the same time. One displaces the other, and so praise is your spiritual discipline. It is how you empty yourself of fear and fill yourself with faith. It is how you silence the internal critic and awaken the internal Christ. It is how you dethrone the tyranny of circumstances and enthrone the reality of divine kingship. When the psalmist says, "Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your dominion endures throughout all generations," he is not merely giving God credit, he is choosing to dwell in that dominion. He is entering into the reality where God reigns, not just in heaven, but in the present moment, in the here and now, in the inner world that shapes the outer. and you can enter that kingdom at any moment through the gate of praise. That is the mystery religion has often missed. Praise is not just worship. It is warfare, but not warfare as the world defines it. It is not striving or struggling or forcing. It is the refusal to bow to illusion. It is the spiritual audacity to say, I see what's happening, but I know who my God is, and I will magnify him, not it. That is how reality begins to bend, not through fear, but through faith, not through effort, but through elevation. You were not created to grovel before your needs. You were created to reign in the awareness of divine supply, but the key that unlocks that realm is praise. All your works shall praise you, O Lord, and your saints shall bless you. They shall speak of the glory of your kingdom and talk of your power. These are not empty rituals. They are the declarations of those who have tasted the higher realm. They speak of power because they carry power. They talk of glory because they live in the radiance of it. You do not need to wait until everything is perfect to live in this way. In fact, the power of praise is most potent when it is offered in the middle of uncertainty. That is when it becomes prophetic. That is when it breaks barriers. That is when it moves mountains, not because the mountain hears you, but because you finally remember who you are. The one who praises is the one who awakens. The one who praises is the one who walks through fire and comes out without the smell of smoke. The one who praises becomes a vessel of divine presence, a carrier of peace, a mirror of the Most High. And everything around them begins to respond. Do not underestimate what happens when you praise. Do not dismiss it as emotional noise or ritualized religion. Praise is the evidence of faith made manifest. It is how you climb out of the pit without moving your feet. It is how you rise in power without lifting a finger. It is how you unlock joy while still surrounded by sorrow. It is how you prepare the atmosphere for breakthrough. It is how you walk into the presence of God without needing to move an inch. Because when your praise is real, your inner world becomes the throne room. You don't go to church to find God. You bring the temple within. You don't beg for heaven to open. You open it with your words. You don't fight your battles with human effort. You win them through divine perspective, and that perspective is maintained through the practice of consistent, intentional, fiery praise. If you want change, start with praise. If you want clarity, start with praise. If you want peace, healing, restoration, abundance, start with praise. Not because praise manipulates God, but because praise aligns you with God. It lifts your sight, it clears the fog, it makes the crooked straight. Praise doesn't move God closer to you. It moves you closer to him, and in that nearness, problems lose their voice, fear loses its grip, and hope becomes the new default setting of your life. You were made for this. You were born to carry light, and the fastest way to ignite that light is to let praise rise. So lift your voice, not because everything is right, but because God is right. Praise, not because you understand it all, but because you trust the one who does. Praise, not as a last resort, but as your first response. And as you do, you will see what the world cannot see. You will hear what the world cannot hear. And you will live in a reality far greater than anything this world can offer, for you will be living in the unveiled glory of God's greatness, made real through the power of your praise. God's greatness is the atmosphere of your break. Through there comes a moment when you must stop seeking breakthrough as an external event and begin to understand it as a spiritual unveiling. Breakthrough is not when the thing changes, it is when you change. It is when the walls of fear fall within, when the prison doors of doubt swing open in your mind, and when you finally walk in the inner confidence that what God has spoken is already finished. The greatness of God is not a theological concept to debate, but a living atmosphere you can enter. It is not something you ask to descend. It is something you rise into by faith. The moment you magnify God's greatness over your situation, that moment becomes sacred ground, not because your location shifted, but because your perception did. And in the realm of perception, everything is spiritual law. You cannot live in breakthrough until you begin to live in the awareness that God is greater, not just greater in general, but greater within you. That is the secret. You are not waiting for greatness to come rescue you from above. The greatness of God has already taken residence within your spirit. And when you magnify him, when you praise him, when you call on his name not in desperation but in trust, you are not calling something far. You are activating what is already present. This is why the psalmist declares in Psalm 145, "Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable." That greatness is not just in heaven. It is the nature of the life that now animates your being. And when you become conscious of it, breakthrough is inevitable. God's greatness is not waiting for you to prove yourself worthy. It is waiting for you to see differently. And the moment you truly see, the atmosphere shifts. Why? Because your inner world no longer agrees with limitation, because your heart no longer bows to fear, because your soul has remembered its origin, and in that remembrance the walls that once felt so permanent begin to dissolve. You no longer seek a miracle, you become the expression of one. You begin to walk as one who already holds the promise even before it manifests. This is not delusion, it is divine agreement. The outer world is slow to catch up with what the inner world already knows. But once the knowing is solid, once it is no longer based on what you see but rooted in who God is, then nothing can hold back what is already yours. You don't pray to convince God, you pray to convince yourself. You don't praise to manipulate heaven, you praise to align yourself with what heaven has already decided. And when you begin to breathe in God's greatness like the very air around you, then everything that once looked like impossibility begins to shrink in the light of what you now carry. You were never called to live as a beggar in the courts of grace. You were created to reign as a son, as a daughter, as a living temple of divine power. But you cannot reign from the state of fear. You cannot reign while constantly reviewing what's missing. You must enter the atmosphere of breakthrough by speaking as one who knows the outcome, by praising as one who has already seen it done, by thinking as one who has already received. That is what magnifying God really means. It is not exaggerating his ability. It is refusing to minimize it in the face of your situation. You must decide which is bigger, the challenge or the one who lives within you. You cannot hold both. The moment you magnify God's greatness, you shrink the authority of your problem. Not by ignoring it, but by placing it under the dominion of a higher law, the law of divine supply, the law of favor, the law of righteousness, the law of completion. The Lord upholds all who fall and raises up all who are bowed down. You do not rise by effort alone, you rise by atmosphere. The atmosphere of praise, of truth, of surrendered knowing. In that space, mountains become stepping stones and delays become doors, and your breakthrough ceases to be a distant hope. It becomes the reality you now walk in. So many cry out for a change in circumstance while holding tightly to an unchanged identity. They say, "God, do it for me," while still seeing themselves as broken, forgotten, or unworthy. But the Spirit cannot flow through a vessel clogged with contradiction. You must become the person your breakthrough belongs to, and that becoming is not a striving, it is a returning to the truth that God is great in you, through you, and as you, that you are not separate from his power, but a living extension of it. That every praise you offer is not just acknowledgement, it is alignment. When you say, "God, you are great," you are not just elevating him, you are elevating yourself into the awareness that your life is now the evidence of that greatness. And when you dwell in that awareness long enough, your desires transform, your worries quiet, your path clears, breakthrough becomes your native language, not just in your speech, but in your state. You walk into rooms differently. You expect differently. You carry yourself as one who knows that divine presence is your source, your supply, your guide, and your goal. That is why praise must not be occasional. It must become the rhythm of your life. Not for performance, but for perception. The more you praise, the more you see, and the more you see, the more you become. And the more you become, the more reality bends to match the image you now hold. You are not a servant of fate. You are not the victim of delay. You are the embodiment of a higher realm, and your responsibility is to remember that in every valley, every test, every pause. The atmosphere of breakthrough is not just visited in moments of worship. It is maintained in the consistency of awareness. The Lord is righteous in all his ways, gracious in all his works. If that is true, and it is, then what you call waiting is not delay, but divine choreography. And what you call stuck is simply the reshaping of your perspective. And what you call impossible is only the invitation to stop looking outward and start magnifying what has always been within. Your breakthrough is not a place you travel to, it is a realm you awaken. And you awaken it by declaring that God is greater, greater than the timeline, greater than the diagnosis, greater than the closed door, greater than the fear that tries to whisper when no one else is around. When you hold that truth long enough, it begins to hold you, and you no longer wonder if it will happen. You begin to walk as one through whom it is already happening. The mind that once doubted is now fixed. The heart that once wavered is now anchored, and the soul that once asked, "When will it be my turn?" now sings, "It is done." This is the atmosphere of your breakthrough. Step into it, dwell in it, speak from it, praise through it, and watch how the world you live in begins to reflect the greatness you finally chose to see. At prayer